I just want to say thank you for coming out today at the Bangor Area Transit Survey meeting. Today is the first kickoff to the public, and we're really looking forward to people's feedback into the services and what folks are looking for, and maybe some things that could be done differently. As you're aware, we've decided to kick off a transit study to gather this information. We've sourced a company by the name of Stantec, and we have representatives out here today that are really going to talk to you a little bit about the process that they're going to undergo, but really looking for your feedback as far as what you want to see in terms of public transportation. Overall, the purpose of the study really is to provide recommendations for improving the service, operations, and overall sustainability of the community connector going forward. So again, here today are representatives from Stantec. On my left, we have Brian Poutre, and on my right, we have John Govis. They're going to go through the process briefly with you right now and really open it up for public discussion. So let's turn it over to John.
Thanks, Richard. Today, and actually yesterday, we began the most important process of our study, which is public engagement. We do this work all around North America, and the value and the quality of the end result come from meetings like those today, where we can engage the public and get your input about what's working today with the existing system, what needs are perhaps being unmet today, how we can meet those needs, and how we can look at the future in terms of developing a sustainable transit system for this region. Now, the forum today is we want to be like SpongeBob. We want to absorb things and not do all the talking. But as Rich said, you know, the end of our result is trying to make the system more effective. That is, the right types of service and the right levels of service, and more efficient. And that means providing the greatest level of service at the lowest possible cost to the rider as well as the taxpayers. Those are the people who subsidize the system and perhaps don't ride the system. Part of our effort is looking at how we can engage more people who don't ride today to use the public transit system here. So that's the goal of our process. A couple of words on the decorum for today. As I said, we're not going to be answering questions. We're at a point in the study where we want to hear from you about what's working right, what's not working so well, things that you would like to see, perhaps things that we could experiment with, and we want to hear from you sincerely. As far as the decorum goes, if you would just, I think we passed around a sign-in sheet, if you would give us some contact information. If you do that information, we'll keep you informed as to the progress of our study as we go along. When you do, if you have a question you'd like to ask or a comment that you would like to deliver to us, and hopefully there's more comments than questions, we would like to start off with just give us your name and what town you live in, please, or what city you live in. So, and at that, one other thing too, because there's so many people in the room, which we appreciate, I'm gonna one question at a time, so to allow everybody in the room to ask as many questions as possible, and everybody gets a fair chance at giving us their opinion about how public transit is operating. Where is this? Okay.
If we didn't get the sign-up sheet, what should we do? Are you gonna?
Oh, it's coming around.
It's on this side right now.
Yeah, it's coming that way. Yes. So again, one other thing, Brian's going to give you some information about the website. We have a survey that's online as of today. We'd like as many possible responses to that survey as possible. If you can't do it online, we will get you a hard copy of it. And so, again, we'll repeatedly go back like we're trying to sell you something, but talking about that online survey and going there. The reason for the online nature of the survey is that it's easier for us and quicker for us to tabulate the opinions and the comments that you have. Brian, what am I missing?
Yeah, thanks for the summary, John. I just wanted to add, just in case you're wondering where we're at in this process, we're still in the very early stages. So if you ask us questions about, oh, are you going to be recommending ABC, we're not in a position to say definitely yes or definitely no. we're at the stage where we're genuinely collecting your feedback, and if enough people are saying similar things, then maybe we need to look at making a case for it, but we're not in a position today to be able to say yes or no. As well, just a note about the website that we have a bunch of these leaflets up here. You're certainly more than welcome to take one or take a small handful and give them to your friends and family or whomever. There's a link to our website on the leaflet. It's Bangor Transit Study. Quite simple. And on the back of the leaflet, there's some just information about what the study's all about. So if you've forgotten what we've said, you can just read the back of the leaflet later. Yeah.
So again, the ground rules are, give us your name and what city you live in, and limit it to one question, hopefully, so we can get everybody in the room who wants to ask us a question or make a comment to be part of it. Anybody like to start off?
Michael Garvey, City Bangor. I'd like to recommend putting on Sunday service. That's it.
I'll take it. Don Chambers, Bangor. I'm concerned with funding since I've heard it was federal.
Just to sort of answer that question, the combination of local money, federal money, and fare box money, and the federal government will pay up to 70 to 80% of the capital expense of buying a bus, but it's a combination of things that go into funding. More questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Eric, and I'm also resident of the city of Bangor that actually uses the bus service. My big concern is the mall hopper bus running behind now because it has to go to 900 Broadway. And so my question is about maybe adding some buses to the underserved areas of Bangor to take the stress off of buses like the mall hopper.
Yeah, just a comment. We're gonna look at the routing and scheduling of all the buses. I guess just a question back for you. Do you use the mall hopper on a regular basis, and do you use it to transfer to other routes, or how do you get to where you need to go if the buses aren't serving your needs?
With me, the mall hopper picks up right at the bottom of my street, near the apartment building where I live. And what I do is I use it to connect with the Cape Art bus or the Center Street. And I also use it if I gotta do errands out on Union Street and stuff like that, and to get downtown.
Thank you.
We'll flip-flop back and forth. We'll go left and right, so we're politically correct.
Eric Jarvie, Hamden. I commend your survey. I actually filled it out today. I think we really have to work hard on making sure their survey gets out to the community. Because at least in Hamden, it's only on the hamden.gov listserv. And that's not even coming close to touching the entire population of Hamden. So I suspect the other communities are gonna suffer the same thing. So we gotta work with the communities and make sure it's getting out to everybody, because we gotta get as much information as we can. I absolutely agree.
Thank you.
You're welcome to more of these if you want. Let's keep going around this way.
Hi, my name is Karen, I'm from Bangor, and I wondered if you guys had considered adding an additional hub at the Bangor Mall. So there was a downtown location and a Bangor Mall location as a central hub, and that maybe they might consider moving the Greyhound buses that has moved way out of town also to the mall area to bring more traffic to the mall, which is obviously failing, but it would bring people into that area. and have an opportunity for them to be able to leave from the area from one central place.
We'll be looking at all the hubs, both Pickering Square and the potential of other hubs. And one of the things that you mentioned, looking at multimodal connections with regional bus services, we think it's important because the other places we've worked in, it's worked very well that the regional buses have brought us ridership, and we've also brought ridership to them. So that's a good comment. We'll be looking at that.
Yes, my name is Steve Wilde. I'm also from Hamden. Probably shouldn't say this, but I'm a counselor over there. The things that I see with the bus that are quite concerning is lower ridership on some of the outlying communities. One of the things that is abundantly missing in this entire system here, and I've lived in many different states, I've lived overseas in past jobs, I don't see any enclosures, no bus signs, no benches. If you're really trying to increase the ridership, why don't we have the basic infrastructure in place to accommodate? This is supposed to be a transit system that helps people that really need it. They don't have any place to sit down. You know, I look pretty decent for a guy in his 50s, but I have my health issues. I can't stand more than maybe 10 or 15 minutes. My back simply won't allow. That effectively takes me right out of going to a bus and standing there unless I time it perfectly. The lower ridership in some of the lower communities causes a kind of a discontent for the taxpayers. One of the number one concerns that I hear is ridership on the Hamden bus is so low, it doesn't justify for the bus system. And I'm not an advocate for getting rid of the bus, trust me. I mean, it's been spun that way in the past in the papers, and I can tell you right now, it's false. I would love to see the bus. My father is, for example, is blind. Doesn't live in these communities, but it would be fantastic if we had that service. But it's got to be a justifiable service at a justifiable cost. And one of the biggest things we're missing is the enclosures and the benches. That's my 2 cents per.
Thank you for your comments. You know, we will be looking at the issues and levels of amenity, because obviously the weather in Maine is such that having some protection for people, both in the summer as well as in the winter, of course, would be important. Yeah. And the other thing that's associated with that too is, you know, providing the public with information about the service and doing that in real time, which is possible in terms of using smartphone applications and other things. But you know, the agency right now does not have a level of technology, which would be one of our recommendations for sure, that they lend technology that could provide a better level of information to the public. And that's like automated vehicle locators that can work with your smartphone to tell you when the next bus is coming to where you are. And that technology also has proven around North America to improve the productivity, which is another one of your issues in terms of improving. You know, one thing needs to be said about the existing system, and you know, we did a peer review as part of our proposal. Your community connector service stacks up fairly well with other agencies in terms of its performance right now. I say that because you know, a lot of agencies around the United States, costs are escalating at an unreasonable and unsustainable amount. But the agency here does a good job so far. Can it do better? It can always do better, and it should do better. And hopefully our recommendations will result in that. But productivity is one thing we'll be looking at. But the agency does fairly well right now in those numbers.
Well, productivity goes up, overall cost of the taxpayers goes down.
That's how the economics supposed to work.
There's 2 ways to look at this, cut it out or increase productivity. I kind of want to see the productivity go up.
We agree with you.
Okay.
We agree with you. And the productivity measurements are defined by service standards, which we'll be recommending, looking at riders per revenue hour, looking at the cost of providing a trip to an unlinked passenger. So all those things will be part of what we come out with our study.
Hi, my name is Kirk Grant. I'm the director of the Bangor Vet Center. We're newly located on Outer Auckland Road. And when we initially started building there, the bus line went out there, but it no longer does. And unlike some other organizations, we're not going to say, no, we have it built into a system for us to be able to go out and pick those people up. But for every person who can't ride the bus out there, 2 veterans aren't being seen by a counselor. And so, for me, what I'm here today for is to advocate that the bus line be brought back out to Auckland Road at least 3 times a week, twice a day. It doesn't have to be repeated over and over, but we need some coverage out there so that way the most vulnerable veterans, the homeless veterans, the low-income veterans, have a way to access counseling.
Good point.
Melissa Heinkman, Bangor. Question is, and I know it's an unfeasible question,
Melissa,
how can we, as a veteran riding, we all live on a limited income, and I guess the question is, I still have to serve my country, I feel I should be able to ride the bus free. But on the other hand, I also feel that if we could just do a half price for the veterans, because as he said, we have a lot of homeless veterans that are struggling, and $1.50 is a lot of money, but if we could do as a veteran, 75 cents both times, or ride free for serving our country, and I know it's the federal part of it, but my opinion is we should be able to ride free because I served and fought for my country.
We'll be looking at fare policy and those issues as well. So we'll be addressing that. You already asked, but let's someone else have theirs. We want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity. I think the lady right there.
Sorry, that's what's important.
I'm Katie Corlew, I live in Hampton, and I am one of those taxpayers who does not ride the bus, but I wanted to make a call for expanded service to Hampton and other locations that aren't served very well. Hampton, for example, we only have a bus like once an hour that comes through. Well, first of all, I used the bus as I was developing within my profession. So as a young professional, I used the bus because I couldn't afford a car. So rather than going into debt to buy a car, I used the bus. When I went back to school to get my advanced degree, I also used the bus because I could not afford a car. And so rather than taking out additional student loans or something like that in order to afford that, I used the bus, and that enabled me to get to the place that I am now, where I am a homeowner, and so I pay property taxes, I own cars, so excise tax, my income with income tax. So having had that support enabled me to get to the point where I'm better able to serve my community through these sorts of taxes. That being said, even though I own a car, I would totally ride the bus if I could, and for 2 major reasons. One is that I'm a climate change researcher, and it is really important to reduce our carbon footprint, and so I would very happily, give up some of my time in order to reduce my carbon footprint. Second, my foot is broken right now. I can drive, but it is very inconvenient and uncomfortable. So again, I would totally give up. It takes me 15 minutes to drive to campus. If it took half an hour or 45 minutes, I would totally trade that time for the convenience of having someone else drive me, basically, to work. But when I looked at the bus routes, and I looked previously several times and kind of found the same thing, it's really difficult to find even how to connect the routes to get to where I need to go. And then when I found out how to get there, it would take an hour and a half of bus transit to get from my home to my work, because there's just that once an hour bus, I actually would have to leave more than 2 hours early in order to get to my classes on time. And I could walk, broken foot and ice notwithstanding, I could walk from my house to work in an hour and 6 minutes. And so having to take more than 2 hours in order to get the same distance is really inconvenient. And then just the difficulty of trying to figure out how to even connect the different routes, and definitely expanded service, meaning more frequent buses. I think we would see an increase in ridership, especially for our young professionals who are, and for our school students. I have a number of students who live out in Hampton and live in other areas who rely on the bus, and sometimes it really cuts into their ability to access their education.
Thank you.
If I can ask a follow-up question. Taking 2 hours to get to work on the bus, is that more a function of the buses come every hour, but they should come every half hour? Or is that more a function of I'm at home and I don't have any way of loading up an app and seeing when the next bus is coming, so I know I don't have to stand out on the street and wait out on the street? Or is it a bit of both?
It's certainly both, but the 2 hours would definitely be because the bus that would be more close to the arrival time would get me to work late. And so class would have been 20 minutes on, so I would have to take the 1 hour earlier bus, which means adding that additional hour into the transit times.
Thank you. That's, that's part of what we're looking at the study in terms of, we deal with the parameters all the time of how much service to operate, the service coverage, the span of service, when it begins in the morning, when it ends at night, because all these are cost drivers. So we try to, come to a balance where we can identify needs like you're talking about. Travel time is important to us, and it's important to non-riders too, because they don't want to take an hour and a half to get around a community where, that trip in a car may take 15 minutes. So if we're going to be competitive, we have to consider that and figure out the most effective way that we can do that. So we're looking at those things that you brought up. It's a very, let me say this, it's a very difficult balance to achieve all those things and make it work, but we want the service. First off, we want to retain the loyalty of the people who are riding today by doing better for them. And the second thing is we think there's opportunity to increase ridership by luring new riders to the service. And the things that you mentioned are important to luring new riders. We have some more on this side. The lady right behind you.
Lisa Feldman, Orono, Maine, and I have been riding the bus since there's been a bus. So, and I want to talk about the Orono route specifically because to me it's paradigmatic about many things that are wrong with our system as a whole. When I first began riding the bus, it ran once every half hour. And when I worked in Bangor, it was great because the connections were better. And if I had to stay a little bit late and miss a bus, it was an inconvenience. Much later on, when I worked with Katie out at UMA Bangor, if I had to stay 5 minutes late and miss the bus, it wasn't an inconvenience, it was a life crisis. And I was very fortunate in that I had a very supportive supervisor who let me rearrange my entire work schedule so that I could make my connections and get on the next to last bus home to Orono, so that if that bus broke down, as the bus in today did, I could still get home on the last bus. Not everybody is so fortunate. And in 1986, 30-odd years ago, we cut service back temporarily because of a budget crisis. Ridership on the Old Town route dropped by a third. You lost all your middle-class people. And it seems to me that since then, we have been managing the bus system to fail. The bus system has recently begun reinvesting in new buses. But we did a survey of our rolling stock several years ago and found out that 17 of our 22 buses were beyond their useful life. And so bus breakdown was so frequent that people like me who depended on the bus to get to work had to program that into our work schedules. That is not acceptable, and it's still very difficult. If you only have service once an hour, Katie is right. It takes you 2 hours to get to work. For me to do a minor errand that involves going anywhere but downtown Orono, and I urge you to visit downtown Orono and see our charming but tiny downtown, which is about 2 blocks 2 sides of 2 blocks. And so there's a lot of stuff I can't do in Orono. So for me to get grocery shopping done is a minimum 3 or 4 hour commitment. First, I have to look at the weather forecast and find a day when I can wait outside, when there isn't a warm, convenient place for me to wait for the bus so that I don't risk hypothermia getting my shopping done. Then, you know, it's an hour on the bus. Then it's hours waiting for the bus. Then it's another hour back. Very difficult. That's a disincentive for people who want to use the bus. If there are people like this fellow's father who want to use the bus, if you want to find out about it, it's not that easy. You can find a lot of great information on the Bangor Bus website, but that's on the City of Bangor government website. And if you live in Old Town, or you live in Hampton, or you live in Brewer, or you live in Orono, or you live in Vesey, that is not an obvious place to look. And there's no place you can look to get real-time information on the bus. On the Old Town route, to add to the difficulty of using the bus, the configuration of the route changes several times a day. So that if you're not paying attention and you get on the bus at the wrong time of day, you will not get to where you think you want to go. And further than that, there's unused time in the schedule because the bus gets downtown to Pickering Square at 5 after and doesn't go out again until quarter after. But in all the years there has been bus service to Old Town, we have never extended it the pathetically short amount of space it would take to improve bus service to our brothers and sisters on Indian Island. So I encourage you to look at the bus system because we have managed it to fail. We have managed it to drive away all but the most committed or most desperate riders. And then we get a lot of loose talk about the bus people. If we could get those bus people out of downtown, a new era of prosperity would come to Bangor. Why don't we change our assumptions and realize that an efficient, functioning public transit system is a key component of community and economic development, and if we had a bus system that worked for lots and lots of ordinary people, we would probably use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Feldman. You'll be happy to know, by the way, we had dinner at Pat's Pizzeria last night, so we support Orono. You know, a couple of things about what you mentioned. We do a lot of these studies, and I've sat on the staffs of large transit agencies. There's nothing more important than service quality. That is the most important thing that comes out of what we'll be recommending. And the issue of the reliability of the service goes back to the infrastructure that supports the service, and that's things like buses and how they're maintained, as well as some of the things that were talked about by some of the speakers earlier, amenities and things such as that. So a lot of the things that you mentioned will be definitely...
There's also an information infrastructure.
Oh yeah, yes. The information is very important in that...
Signage,
right.
Schedules at the bus shelters,
Right.
Bus shelters.
Right. And in this day and age, you know, real-time information and providing that is very much an easy thing to do, and it's not costly. So we appreciate your comments. We have... Yes, please.
First, extending bus hours longer is an issue of employability with me. But secondly, I'm not sure that the community is aware of certain patterns. 1st of the month, 4th of the month when people get their checks, 14th of the month when people get their food stamps. In the summertime when moms are home with their kids, they're going to take their kids on the bus. If people were aware of those patterns, they might be able to work around them.
Okay. Yes?
Kim Meyer, Bangor. I'm a power user of the bus. We had a chance to talk this morning. One of the things that is really important to me is obviously there was a lot of support for later hours, that has been said. Is that incorporated in the survey that I
Do we have a service
service
span question? We must have one there.
Yeah, there's, service span is touched on in the
Karen
survey.
says no.
See,
It's,
I took it today, I didn't see anything about it right now.
I'm saying that might be missed if it's not outlined in the survey, so I haven't seen it, but
Maybe it
I've
was
just
worded,
heard
we'll
that.
look at it.
it's more indirectly, but I would encourage you at the final question, saying if you have any other comments that you'd like to provide, you can certainly expand as much as you wish.
It's kind of in there if you're a non-rider, but if you say you're a rider, there's no question it could be interpreted as expanded hours.
The real question that I have right now is, one of the concerns I have is safety. And I'm not gonna get into a topic about hubs and things like that. I find myself mostly feel very, very safe using the community connector. If there are hubs, mini hubs, however it does work, is it your purview to suggest or when you decide on what places would be best for a hub, that it be a place that is, has businesses around, has other things, so it's not, my fear is I'm gonna be left off in a desolate place, a dead area of town, at 4 or 5 o'clock at night, if we don't get extended hours, or if we have extended hours even later, that there's no open businesses around, and that there's no security or protection. Even in downtown Pickering Square, I think a lot has happened that for the business owners and for the bus riders, they have produced some police presence downtown, and that has been great. I would love to see that expanded. I don't know how that would relate to you and your purview of what you recommend to the city.
Well, we look at hubs from the issue of the rider. First off, the perspective of the rider. Is it going to enhance the rider experience? First off, in transit planning, you don't like to make people transfer. You know, the golden rule in our business is we can take people from their origin is to their destination without them having to transfer. Think about the economics of that. If I'm taking you from one point to where you want to go, that's one cost. If I have to take you to someplace else and you transfer, I'm really lowering my margin, you know, because I'm providing more service to you at the same price. So, you know, you try to minimize the transfers, but you know, the issues of hubs themselves, most hubs work most effectively if they're in neighborhoods, if they're in the communities, if there's activity around them. We're building 17 mobility hubs now in the city of Los Angeles. They're all in communities. And they're all multimodal. They serve private services as well as public transit agencies. So they're better if they're in walking distance. Now, you know, that's not always achievable in every community based on the comprehensive plans and based on how development is taking place. But putting things in isolation only work if it's a park and ride type of situation where we're trying to get long distance commuters. Most of the time, mobility hubs should be in neighborhoods and should have walking access or access by active transportation. I can't forget bicycles as well, or scooters or whatever. So.
And just to add to that, in other jurisdictions that we've worked in, the most successful hubs tend to be the ones that incorporate the most different land uses. So not only for transferring buses, but for retail, for grabbing a bite to eat, even for office space. That's not to suggest that all of those components need to be present for a hub to be successful, it's just that it's something we would try to kind of maximize, so that way there's the most amount of natural pedestrian activity going through there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the hubs we've been developing in places like Denver and places like that, we even have daycare centers that are in the hub. So that instead of the parent having to make an extra trip to drop the children off, they bring them right there, and there's a daycare center there. It's not always achievable, but it's conceptually it helps us. It minimizes the trip for the patron and keeps people as loyal riders. We have a question over here.
Hi, I'm Cynthia. I'm from the University of Maine. in Orono, and I'm here on behalf of the Office of Sustainability on campus. So we were just wondering if you guys are looking into outreaching to students particularly with your surveys, and if we could assist you in doing that, gathering the data. And also, we noticed, like, I have my own car, but I always see people try and get to class, and like our school rarely closes down for the weather. So I see students like walking like miles to get to school and their classes. And the bus services, I think they run till like 5.
I think so.
Yeah, till 5, and not on the weekends, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Which is kind of ridiculous because people need to get onto campus for late classes or you know, any weekend activities. So I was wondering if you guys were looking into, you know, kind of outreaching the students in this area and figuring out, you know, how they can get to their classes a little bit more.
On the first issue, talk with us afterward. We'd like as much help as possible. And I say the same thing to everybody in the room. The more information we get back, the better the results are going to be. You know, we always say about these studies, we'd like to have everybody in the community's fingerprints on them. So, you know, as far as the span of service issue, I think we'll be looking at that at the overall context of, you know, how late the service should operate based on demand and based upon need. And again, it goes back to the issue of if we identify unmet need and looks like we can create ridership, all the better. So the more people fill out the surveys, the more we can look and identify the need and assess that need. And when we look at need, it's not only just the surveys, we look at demographic data, we look at travel patterns, we look at existing usage. You know, all this data is there to look at, and we have to put it all together and make the best recommendation you can to the city about how its resources should be allocated. So.
Yeah, and like, are you guys, you know, do you guys have any idea of how you're going to distribute the information of like the timing of when these bus transits would be put into place, or like, are you guys thinking of?
We're going to come back. This is an iterative process we have
Okay.
scheduled, so we're going to come back during the study and have some recommendations that we're going to be sharing. It's not like we, you know, go away and magically come back and, you know, descend our wisdom on you. It's not our wisdom. It's what are we doing to serve you and how we're responding to your needs, the needs of people who are riding today, as well as looking at the unmet needs that have been talked about here in the room today.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, see us afterward though. We'd like some help down on the campus. Because he wants to go back to Pat's Pizzeria.
Just to add, we really, the report that we write with our recommendations, we're not just going to say like we want to do this, we want to do that. It's going to be accompanied by a robust implementation plan to ensure that the plan that we prepare is as actionable as it can be.
Yeah.
We'll come back to you.
All right.
I'm Catherine. I live in Bangor, and I am blind, so I am pretty much stuck using the bus if I want to go anywhere and be as independent as possible. And so for me, one big thing is definitely extended hours. If you want to do anything downtown or anywhere else and you rely on the bus and it's an evening activity, you can't. Or you have to rely on the kindness of friends or family because there is no service. But I'm also wondering, you're talking a lot about real-time mapping and knowing where the buses are. Have you thought about also accessibility for those who are visually impaired or are deaf or anything like that? And also in terms of not just being able to see, oh, a bus is on the way, but actually knowing where you are when you're on the bus. Because I know the bus drivers are fantastic, but I've been forgotten more than one time when I've asked to be let off somewhere because I can't tell where I am.
To answer your question, we are very much engaged in making sure that we're compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act in every aspect of our recommendation, and that includes real-time information. We even have a mobile application that we worked on in Los Angeles where people can pay their fares with a smartphone that is accessible to people with disabilities. So, you know, the technology is there, as you probably know yourself, to do these things. So ADA compliance is absolutely a must. And, you know, making sure that the service is accessible, not only from actually the delivery of the service, but also the things that support the service, like the amenities, for example. Is the bus stop shelter that we potentially recommend, it should be ADA compliant. It should accommodate a person in a wheelchair to be able to move around and position themselves for when the bus is coming. It also, you know, in some situations, it could include static information that could be in Braille, other forms of tactile information. So all that will be considered. And ADA compliance is a must. There's no doubts about that. Back there?
Melissa Heisman, I know you said one question, but the one thing I've noticed that's extremely important is we don't have specific designated stops. And I ride the system every day and I'm out in the community. And an example is for the Hammond Street, if you come down Center Street, they stop at every block. If you had, and I know it's possible it can be done within a week, I have done it myself to help the community, is to put like on 1st and 3rd Street, 2nd Street, the sign so that they know where to stand. And every time the bus stops, because they're going to pick up that person, makes them 1 or 2 minutes later, or if there's somebody with a baby or handicapped, then the Hammond Street runs on, so she has to call, and all the other buses are gonna run late, because there's no specific sign that says that. And in order to do that, if it's in front of a business, they will accommodate you with one thing, and it's not about the snow removal or safety. Their biggest concern is in the community, is where are the people gonna throw their cigarette butts? When I changed it for the growing place on Hammond Street, and I talked to the lady, it's what she said, and I said, I will personally put out a butt can. And the other day I saw her and she's never seen one, but if you give, I am a smoker myself, give me some place to put it, and I'm not gonna throw it on the ground in front of your business. But I'm gonna have a sign that says, okay, this is where we stop, and they do run late. And everybody has said that, and it needs to be in all of the communities, because like, as I said, if you stop for one, then you can stop for another, and you can stop for another. Every minute the bus driver stops, she runs late, you know, and it's only in a half-hour run, and they're trying to, so they either have to speed up, or all the other buses run late, and then hence, within an hour, all the buses are running 5 minutes late, because you have to make 6 different stops. And if you could just talk to the community here, we can make those changes, like, in a week.
Yeah, to answer your question, Melissa, this is one of the few agencies left in the United States, diesel United States, that still has flag stops. And so we actually had a discussion about that about noontime with the drivers over in the driver's room. So we are looking at that. It's too early to rush to the conclusion that we would get there. But as you stated, having designated stops improves your on-time performance and improves your service reliability. And by the way, it speeds up the travel time.
Can I ask if you've observed that across all the routes, or is it mostly just the one route?
Yes, there are very limited signs that say community connector stop here. And the bus driver will stop because a lot of them know where to stop because so many of us ride. Or you can pull the bell and the bus driver will stop, not normally, like, say Walmart. Well, I mean, hypothetically, okay, I need to go to Walmart, so they will go there. But if there's a designated stop for everybody within an area, that's where they're gonna go, and that's where your hub would be to make it safer. But like I said, big thing is butt cans.
Hi, I'm Kirk Granigan, Bangor, and hearing people talk, one of the things that sort of popped up in my mind is 21 years ago I was over in Germany on an aging transit system that had people coming, had a shuttle coming every 7 minutes. If you were traveling in and around the city, you were anywhere within a half an hour. And if you went outside of the cities, the most you'd have to wait was a half an hour for the next one. Why 21 years later are we so much slower?
Well, you know, transit has evolved in the United States very slowly, and I've had the fortune of doing work in Asia and in Europe. And as you know from your experience there, they are so far ahead of us in terms of public transportation and, using and deploying smart city approaches to make all their public services more effective and more efficient. And we're doing bus rapid transit, which is what you spoke of, very frequent buses on one line. We're doing that in a lot of places in the United States with a great degree of success. We're catching up in terms of doing these things. To get to the level of service that you're talking about, we'd have to do one thing immediately, and that's learn the technology. You can't operate every 7 minutes if you only have a radio dispatch system. It simply does not work. So you need the technology. The other thing that comes along with service every 7 minutes, of course, is you need the money. And that's an issue. It has to be looked at in terms of, what's the investment in that service. It goes back to one of the things we'll be looking at, however. You look at service coverage, you look at the span of service, and you look at the frequency of service. And, where we have ridership today, a better investment would be putting more frequency on those routes because you generate more ridership, and taking it away from, we all know in every community we see buses that don't have a lot of people riding. And in some situations you have to make tough decisions and say that we're going to cut service from an area that has very low or non-existing ridership. What you have to do in this process, the feds require you, is look at alternatives for those people who are being disenfranchised. And luckily there are alternatives out there that could perhaps meet those people's needs. But we're playing catch up, and Bangor's not the only place that has problems in terms of making its system better than it is today and making it more effective. I think we have a new person over here. Okay.
Well, and as a non-bus rider, I would be a bus rider if it was operating at that level.
Yeah. So how about new people? New people.
There's the lady over here.
New people.
My name is Karen Mary's daughter. I live in Bangor, and I'm a regular bus rider. Riding the bus works really well for me for a number of reasons. One is my partner and I own a car, so I have a backup. I work a job that allows me to be very flexible about the hours that I work. And I live on a bus route that runs every half hour, Monday through Saturday. So for those reasons, the bus works really well for me. And anybody who doesn't fit those, doesn't have a car backup, is on a route that only runs every hour, doesn't have flexible work schedules, much harder time making it work. So it's similar to what Lisa said. We designed a system that's not convenient enough or attractive enough for people who have another option. So they, most of the time, do not ride the bus. We designed a system, as Lisa said, that the desperate ride, the people who have no other option. And for them, it really doesn't work well. You can't easily get to where you need to be on time. You can't easily get to some places you need to be. And then the taxpayers who have another option look at it and it looks like a charity. It just looks like a charity service. And then people get resentful. Why are we spending our hard-earned tax dollars to get these people where they need to go? There isn't enough of an understanding of how public transit can really work in a city for all the people in a city. It should be doing that, but we need to invest the money to do that. There isn't enough of an understanding that we're already subsidizing cars way more than we're subsidizing public transit. All the taxpayers in Bangor are subsidizing single car ownership at a much higher rate than they're subsidizing public transit. So there needs to be a change in understanding about where the charity is. The charity is actually going to all those free parking spaces downtown and high-end real estate in the middle of our city by giving free parking to people, for example. There's one good example. I would like to say also that because the system works for those who have no other option, those people have a really hard time giving input into the decision-making about public transit. You all have heard this already. I'm just going to say it again. City council meetings are in the evening when the buses don't run. So it's really hard for people to get to them. Even a hearing like this, which is during bus hours, if you work or go to school and use the bus and it's your only transportation, To get to this meeting, you probably would have had to leave your work or your school at least an hour and a half before this hearing started to get here on time. And by the time it ends, some people, if they have to make a connection, will not be able to make a connection. So again, people like me have the luxury of being able to come to this and speak up about my opinions, but people who really depend on it for the basic necessities of life, it's going to be hard for them. For senior citizens to come out in the winter and in the late afternoon when it's going to be dark, when they have to go home with icy sidewalks, that's also difficult. The fact that we only had a week's notice for this hearing meant that it's really hard to get the word out, especially to people who are not online, which a lot of the riders, especially seniors, are not online. For them to do a survey, and we understand today that the survey is only for 2 weeks from today, and we're done with the survey. So to get the word out to the university or get the word out to seniors who are not going to easily go online, I understand, I've done surveys, that it's a lot easier to compile surveys, but if you're not getting the data from a lot of the people who use the system because they're not doing the survey that way, and 2 weeks simply does not give us, as community volunteers, time to get those surveys out to people and get them back so that you can have that information. So I think that we have to be looking for this transit study and then ongoing how input gets to the city and the other communities, feedback from the people who need it the most, because the system we have now is not getting that feedback. Somebody over here?
Who else? Got someone in the
Yeah.
back. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Kevin Holmes. I'm right here in Bangor, and actually right next door at the schoolhouse. Now that I don't have a car, the bus is really quite convenient for me, but there are problems, of course. And I have to agree about the enclosures. There's definitely some high use areas there should be, as well as markers for people who aren't familiar with the bus service or maybe new to the area and don't know where the buses stop. And as far as extended hours, of course, I can't do anything, after 5 and 6 o'clock. If I wanted to go out to a movie or shopping or to eat, I got to get it all done in the daytime. And I'm not an early riser. So, one other thing I was thinking of, I ride the Broad line, both buses quite often. The north bus leaves quarter past the hour, that's Brewer South leaves at quarter of, and there are hour runs. And they both go to Shop and Save, and from there, Hannaford's and Brewer, and from there, it's the same route for both buses. So why couldn't the Brewer buses maybe run on the half hour and be a third bus at the Hannaford parking lot to cover that other, the rest of the route that they're both traveling? In some places, smaller buses would be useful, probably, if you're running every half hour, you may not need one of the big buses. I've certainly been riding on buses enough to get on and find, 2 or 3 people, or if that, so, but I've also been in some. At Cape Cod, I know that run is pretty full, so, but, smaller buses, I think, would be good in some places.
Hi, I'm Luke. I'm from BZ. I take the Orono route a lot to get around, and one thing that I agree with Lisa and a bunch of people on is, I guess there's a lot of things. There's the stigma that's involved with a lot of people my age that I talk to about riding the bus. They don't really like think of it as like it should be in any other city, just a a viable option that is just like a normal thing to do. Also, for me, I'm not a student or anything, and so and like being in BZ, I don't really get on the bus next to any place that would have like change for me, and I know the bus drivers don't really carry change. Also, the whole half as much frequency on Saturdays, kind of a rough thing because it takes that 2 hours and makes it like even longer. So yeah, just to add on to everyone else, I think that would be cool to look into some of those things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, this gentleman right here.
First off,
Can you give us your name?
Oh, yeah. Raymond Dutton, I live here in Bangor. First off, the bus hours need to be extended. I mean, this bus might work great if you have a 9 to 5 job. Not everyone has that nowadays. If anyone needs to go grocery shopping and they don't have a 9 to 5 job, they can't. If they want to hang out with their friends, they can't. If they want to go to a movie, they can't. Now another place where I live, and this was 20 years ago, mind you, 20 years ago. We ran till 8 or 9. Why aren't we running till 8 or 9 here? Seriously. And how about if they stop trying to kill off routes before they've even started? Example, Udland Road route. Oh great, we have this road that goes out to Udland Road. We have a 4-hour layover in the middle. What is this, airport or what? It makes no sense. They basically killed that route before it even started with that 4-hour layover in there. Why? You aren't going to be able to have a 4-hour layover on any route and have people think it's convenient. And obviously, if people don't think it's convenient, they aren't going to use it. So I think, yeah, the city killed the Udland Road route long before it really got going. Probably other things.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I think it's
She's doing well.
So my name is Erin Brown. I live in Bangor. I take the bus Monday through Friday, twice a day to go to Maine. I'm a student there. One thing to tell you how bad the information online about the buses is that I live about a mile from the depot in Pickering. I walk that every single day because it's easier than trying to figure out how I would take a bus from closer to my house to the depot. And it's been, 0 degrees, and I will leave in the morning. So it's cold. With the survey, one of the questions it asks is, when do you take the bus? The last option was after 7 p.m. As far as I know, nobody run past them. So if you're using that information to say that, oh, people don't use the bus past that time, right, we don't use the bus past that time because we can't, not because we don't want to. And like a lot of people said, I couldn't easily find a way to give my feedback about the fact that I would like it to run later. I left a comment, but a lot of people won't, I think, and so you're missing that opportunity to get a lot of data. We have to have a flag down system for the bus as far as the route that I take the Old Town route. I think it's about 6 stops that are like official throughout the entire route. It's about 11 miles each way as far as my math says. So that would be 22 miles round trip. So if you didn't have a flag down system, it would be 1 stop roughly every 4 miles, a little bit less. And especially like as you move through Bangor, that is not anywhere near enough. Did I have anything else? Oh, and so for this meeting, by my looking things up, for 4 of the bus routes, the last bus leaves from the depot at 5:15. So people stayed at the end of this meeting and are dependent on the buses to get to their home for the night. They can't stay till the end of this meeting. It's not an accessible time for people, and it's just
you know, luckily I can walk home, but not everybody has that option.
Can I ask when your classes at Maine finish for the day? Like when would students be needing to come back?
So I leave, my classes, I'm lucky, they're done in the morning, but I've had, you know, review sessions with the professor and things like that. There's clubs I can't join, because I just can't leave Maine at that time. Yeah.
There were late afternoon and evening classes. I taught at evening in the fall, and my class got out at 5. So.
Yeah, there are evening classes.
And other students are still coming.
Labs.
I've been lucky, I haven't.
Lots of internships and things, so that people who are tied to the bus really lose out on a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, just one other thing too. Last fall, I actually went to an athletic event that was held at the university. One of the weekends that I went to the event, I actually ended up not leaving Orono University till after 5, and then the second time I was up there for an athletic event on a Saturday was I had to leave the game a couple hours early because the problem with the university is on Saturdays there's only one bus that goes up there, and then the thing of it is between the 2:15, after 2:15 there's a 3-hour gap between 2:15 and then the time the last bus leaves downtown to go up there at 5:15. So it makes it awfully difficult if people would like to go to a football game on campus, you know, go to a football game on campus and they would like to be able to stay and watch the whole game, but can't because they have to leave early to make sure that they're getting back into Bangor to make the in-town bus connections.
Thank you.
Right here. Where's the mic?
Really don't need it. Jane from Hamden, 3 quick points. 1, thank you for whoever organized this and has initiated getting these folks here to hear the comments. I think that's tremendous that our communities have come together and are getting the feedback and taking action. Second thing, the commuters have done, or the commuter bus system has taken surveys as to riderships in the various communities. The challenge is they do ridership for a route, and because you're dealing with multiple communities, the individual community doesn't know what the ridership is within their town, either coming or exiting. Example is the Bangor, VZ, Orono, Old Town. Well, if they only click pick up a rider, pick up a rider, pick up a rider, they don't know what community they're coming from. So that's a bit of a challenge to find out where is your ridership being generated. And the third thing is, and I'm sure you're looking at this, is chassis size and alternative fuel systems because of our big footprint here. And there are multiple universities that the partnerships with them have been tremendous, multiple universities in this town, and the students are able to ride at low cost or no cost, as well as employees, and I think that's a real positive. And thank you so much for coming. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Over here. Just pass it out.
Sure. I guess I'll speak and just give it to you, Cal. So I want to correct myself. I don't know if I need the mic. I want to correct myself a little bit on this. My name is Jack McKay. I'm from Bangor.
Close.
With the mic. With the mic.
Yes.
All right, my name is Jack McKay. I'm from Bangor. I'm on the Transit Advisory Committee, which just met for the first time yesterday. And part of the reason why, when I spoke up on the question of the questionnaire, I got a copy of the questionnaire today, and I read it quickly. I didn't notice it, but it is there. It's just a little bit buried, and that's the question of expanded hours. And what it says, I prefer bus service with longer service hours, even though my buses may come less frequently. And then the question for non-bus riders.
No, I don't remember that. That's for riders?
Yeah, that's for riders.
I don't remember.
And then for non-bus riders, it's routes and schedules don't cover my needs. And part of the reason The thing that I'm really, it's great to have this meeting, it's good to have you guys here, it's good to have some focus on it. What I'm really concerned about is this incredibly rushed schedule. I don't think it's in your control, and I'm glad Kathy Conwell from the city manager's here, and Rich, you're here, is, there was a kickoff call for the meeting. The Transit Advisory Committee wasn't invited to it. Our first meeting was yesterday. The first time we see this questionnaire was today. And it's going live with 2 weeks with an end date, February 21st. Now, why this question is so important, Transportation for All, a year and a half ago, did a survey, face-to-face, 373 people. Far and away the top question was expanded service, expanded hours, weekends, and weeknights. And that is a way to increase ridership, because growing ridership is a great way, to increase cost, increase productivity, profitability, everything else. And so if you were to have a question, like, would you use the bus more if it ran nights and weekends? Or would your use of the bus increase or occur if it ran nights and weekends? Would give really different results. So, but my question also is this time frame. In the RFQ that I saw, it gave 9 to 12 months for the survey after the award was given. That's what I understand is the most recent RFQ. And you guys were awarded the contract in January, and you've got to complete it by the end of May, which is 4.5 months. So again, the rush nature of this, why is it going so quickly? How can we adjust it so there's more participation? So I think that's essentially it.
I mean, we work at the behest of our clients and try to adjust our schedule, our work to their particular needs. Some of those things are attached to budget cycles, and some of them are a sense of urgency in terms of need. And so that's how we do our work. As far as the issues of input and engagement, I think that, that schedule can be adjusted. I mean, the survey being up, it could be up longer. I mean, it's just an issue of, how quickly can we get the data and do the tabulations and use that public input as part of our process in terms of, what is working today and what is not working, and then figure out what unmet needs are there and how we position this in the future. So, it does take some time to do these things, but I mean, we are, committed to doing this in the time frame that we were allocated to do it. And we're going to give it, the best shot as possible. And in the process, as I mentioned, we're committed to transparency. I mean, we want, people to talk to us all through this process. We're better served by listening to what the community has to say about the service it has today and what would serve you better in the future. So,
in regards to what you just said,
yeah.
Does the community help you form the survey?
No,
because a survey is only as good and will only give you the answers that you want based on the questions that are there.
Well, the survey formats that we use are a combination of things we've used all over North America. So there's no gerrymandering of questions. I mean, we're not like asking a political question where we're begging the answer. These are questions that help us formulate how we're going to do our analysis and how we're going to make our recommendations. Sure. So, I mean, they have to yield certain inferences from people as to whether, like on the non-rider survey, we really want to see if there's a serious commitment here or is it window dressing. Would you really, is there a potential group that we're missing because we're not writing, we're not delivering the right types of service right now or the right levels of service. And then we can look at our recommendations and make those recommendations to attract more of those people. As I said, first and foremost, the issue is, keeping the people who are riding today loyal and keeping them riding and doing the best possible and providing the best possible and highest quality service to them. So, we usually don't get people involved in the questions because we end up with, I hate to say this, but sometimes the participation in that phase of it doesn't yield good data for us to do the analysis from.
If I can add to that, the survey is just one tool in a whole box full of tools that we're using to gather feedback. Things about the service span and how late the buses are running, that's better gleaned through meetings like we're having right now in here. So it's not like the survey results are more important than what we're discussing here today. It's just different tools serving different purposes. And the other challenge about surveys as well is that if you make it any longer than like just a couple of minutes for people to fill out, then they're just simply not going to finish it. And
Yeah,
we
your
really
response
can't-
rates end up being lower.
It's really hard to get drill down into the details again and ask a lot of pointed questions about things like how late the buses are running without having people just kind of lose interest halfway through. So that's why we have a whole suite of engagement strategies instead of just one or two of them.
Got one guy in the back there.
You mentioned tools specifically other than the survey for public input. Could you briefly talk about what you plan on getting more input from the public?
Well, we have public forums, we have an online survey, we're doing face-to-face meetings, we're doing engagement with particular populations, like we spent time with the drivers today.
Right. I'm speaking specifically about the public, us.
Yeah.
Other than this meeting and the survey, you don't have to answer now, obviously, but obviously it's important for most people in the room to continue to give you feedback as this process goes. So I don't know how many of these you have planned.
Well, when I talk about the website, I mean, and people can interact with us through that website.
If they have technology.
Yeah, right. That's kind of what we're saying here. Is you keep mentioning LA, great city, tons of resources, and a much higher bar for technology. I mean, I'm
not necessarily. Don't believe what you see on TV.
I guess it's really hard, I assume, for you guys to get a feel for an area in such a short amount of time. So,
well, we were also spending time at Pickering Square, talking to people as they come on and off the buses.
We have people riding buses today. We rode buses. We will continue to ride buses and talk to people and engage with people. So, really, through this process, it never stops. But what we always say is the reason to have meetings like this, the reason to have surveys is, let's leave no stone unturned and people come out and give us as much information as possible. I mean, as I keep saying, our reports and our studies are better received and implemented at a higher level if we have great levels of public participation, be it small cities or large cities. So, the more we hear from people, the better off we are. You get smarter in this business by listening to people, not preaching to people. So we believe that.
Well, I am a retired librarian and an active library volunteer, and I'd like to address the question of access to your service. And I'm going to encourage you to do some active outreach to community partners, including the public libraries in our partner communities of Brewer, Hamden, Old Town, and Orono, all of which have excellent small libraries with very, very community-minded librarians who are experienced in reaching people on the other side of the digital divide. I'm going to ask you to outreach to Eastern Area Agency on Aging, to Patty Hamilton at Bangor City Health and Welfare, and to the senior meals sites, to the social service agencies. There are, and go downstairs and talk to Ben Treat, who's the library director here, because there are a lot of people who just aren't, like on whatever Facebook or whatever it is, Twitter that you've advertised, where you're really, really, really going to have to go out and reach people. And I'm going to say, for a lot of seniors like me, where going out in winter is so horrible, right. We are only actually on the bus maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. And if you rely on a flyer on the bus to reach them, you will fail and you will not reach core areas of people you need to talk to.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, as much as everybody in the community can help us, if everybody in this room goes out tonight and tells 10 friends about the survey, we'll end up with 500 more surveys, if not more. So, you know, be our disciples and go out and preach about people taking the survey. I know, you know, we're talking about getting hard copies of the surveys out to people who don't have internet access. So, you know, you can be our best ambassadors in helping us overcome these barriers.
All the libraries have public access computer terminals
Right.
and are used to helping people do things online.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Or they
normally
can come
use,
into my office and I'll fill it out for them. I'll do exactly what they want. More than happy to.
Okay. You know where the city manager's office is? It's the third floor.
Third floor.
Right.
More than happy to. Come in with your paper survey and I'll put it in for you.
And who are you, madam?
if you've got such a short window to get answers, why aren't you using radio and television?
Because of the expense associated with it. You know, we're sending out news releases and begging people, you know, cable TV is regular TV, we're gonna be sending out news releases to people and trying to push people to the website. So, you know, we're doing as much as we can in that area. You know, part of the issue with that is traditional media is like, you know, it's different these days because you have to go across a broad spectrum of things to communicate with people. And it has to be, you know, face-to-face, it has to be online. And, you know, then we beg for whatever coverage we can get. I mean, obviously tonight the turnout, there'll be stories tonight on television because we got two TV stations covering this event, so which is good. And we thank you for making that happen because if we had one person in the room, they would have turned around and gone back and covered a car crash. But they stayed here and did stories, so that was good.
Hi, I'm Gail from the Bangor Inn and I ride the bus. I'm wondering if it would be feasible for the bus to be run on Sundays. There are, I know at least 12 people who'd like to be able to take the bus back and forth to church. And as it stands right now, they're not able to because there's no buses and there's no way for them to get back and forth.
We'll be looking at weekend service and looking at the cost of doing that and figuring out how it could be done effectively. You're not the first person who's brought up Sunday service. Mostly members of the clergy brought it up, I don't know. No. Yes, we'll take a look at that. But again, you know, it's the issue of looking at what types of an audience that we could get for that in terms of a market for ridership. So that's an issue. Darcy?
Yeah, hey, I just have one really quick comment, which is that I've heard a lot of people talking about taxpayers. I am a bus rider and I'm also a taxpayer, so, you know, just wanted to throw that out there. We are taxpayers too, so, and you know, like, I don't have kids, but I'm happy to help pay for public schools because I'm part of a community and it benefits everybody, so I think we should keep that in mind when we're talking about taxpayers.
I'm ready. My turn now. Get ready. Thank you, guys. How y'all doing tonight? You know, I'm a
So
good.
can you give us your name?
Oh,
and where
yeah.
you live?
I'm Ushi. I'm a Bangor Knight.
Okay.
All right, the reality is I sit here and I'm a good hearer. Anybody can listen, but are we hearing what people are saying? There's some stuff here that I agree with and there's some stuff I don't agree with. I hear a lot of anger, especially from this man over here. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear hardcore reality. I used to take the bus in the 90s. I used to drive to UMO. Take the bus to UMO. I really love that scenery. I haven't rode a bus probably 5 years. I can't afford a car because it's too expensive. I get that. I understand this is a business. All right, let's put the BS on the side of the river. I understand this is a business. I understand you have all walks of life of people here. You have people who are disabled. You have people who are working probably part-time, full-time. I remember in the 90s, late 90s, when I used to go shopping, it'd take me almost 3 hours to get one destination to another. And then it's like, man, I missed the bus, I don't have to wait. But now I don't take the bus unless I really need to. I'm just kind of confused. Why is this become an issue now? I think he said they used to have buses 8 to 9, or they used to run from 8 to 9 p.m., is that correct?
Here, another community,
Yeah, so the problem, what I'm hearing, why is this such a big problem now? Is it has to do with budget money? Because I know everything's a business, I get that. But what is the reality versus fantasy? That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Well, the reality of it is that the service hasn't been looked at for many years.
Okay.
And usually agencies look at their service on a pretty regular basis. Most agencies do it every 3 years or so now, every 5 years. And I'm talking about, going in and looking at your routes, looking at your infrastructure, making sure what you're doing is within the standards that you set for the service, and looking at it, more importantly, looking to see if your services have kept up with what's going on in the community in terms of development. For example, we have a lot of our clients, their populations have aged, so we actually changed the types of services, like in Palm Beach, Florida. The population changed. We were operating a lot of fixed route buses, big buses on routes, but there were elderly people who needed more services like paratransit services, which are door-to-door on-demand services. So now in Palm Beach County, about 60% of the agency's budget goes to that service because the population has aged. So that's an example of how you change the service because of changes, demographic changes, development changes, whatever. So, agencies are continually looking at their services, and this hasn't been done here, our understanding, in a while. So that's the reason to look at the service.
And in terms of the reality versus fantasy point that you bring up, in the context of this study, we have to realize that, we have a finite pool of resources. And to John's point at the beginning, we're looking at delivering services in the most effective and the most efficient way possible. So how do we make the best use of the pool of resources that we have available, and then craft a viable and implementable strategy to make those recommendations happen?
I wish you well.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Yes? Oh, who's got the microphone?
I do.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Her hand was up first.
No, go ahead. You're a newcomer. You're a newcomer. Go ahead.
Newcomer? Okay, is this on?
Yeah.
There's a little black button on the top.
Test, okay. Hi, my name is Blaine. I live in BZ, and I would say that I'm primarily a non-rider. I have a car, but I have been on the bus a number of times over the years, obviously. Sometimes it dealt with having my car in a garage for a couple of days, and it was just convenient for me to take the bus. Sometimes it's about that it's just really good for the environment to not use your car so often, and if you could just take a trip somewhere that's on the route that I'm on. So, and I will use it in the future. But the last time, and I agree with a lot of the stuff that people are saying. For me, it wouldn't be so much of a nighttime, but I agree it should run later. And I certainly agree with a lot of the things that people are talking about. The survey for 2 weeks, I just totally agree. It's just completely crazy to be a 2-week survey. I have been involved in surveys before in the past. You're at least a month on surveys. Unless you have everybody in the room at one time in one place where the survey will happen. But in order to expand out to the people that these people are talking about, the demographics, the various members of the community, you gotta have them in 2 weeks. And the librarian's comment about the libraries is something I was thinking of as well, which is, I get it, I'm not knowing technology, but if you can access a downtown, which everybody can, these librarians are really great about bringing you over to the computer and doing that survey for you. And these libraries are open Monday through Saturday. So I'm not saying that easy breezy, it should be no so easy to do a survey. I'm just saying if you're not tech savvy or you don't have these things, just walk into a library and say, I want to take this bus survey, and someone will come to that computer and help you do that. So I would just suggest to people who are saying things about like accessing technology to not make that a hindrance, because it is available. My comment deals with customer service regarding the BAT bus in Bangor, specifically with some of the drivers that I've experienced in the past, and I'm not naming and I'm not accusing. But there's a variety of temperaments that happen in some of the bus drivers that I don't appreciate. I have seen drivers in the past, and it's good that you have been talking to them, and I will definitely make that comment online. I have been in scenarios on the bus where the driver is just outright, completely, inappropriately rude to passengers coming on. Comments like, you should have been over there, you're not over there, you should have been over there. My last trip was about a month or so ago, and that's when I myself experienced this, where I was on Route 2 in BZ, and the rule that I know, the setup that I understand has been, is if you are at a point on a road where there's a street intersection, if there's not a street that's intersecting on the road on the side that you're on, but there is across the road, they stop to pick you up. If it's not like unless that's changed, that's what I've always known. And so I waved down this bus driver coming towards Bangor, and he just kept going, and then he finally pulled over about 150 feet up the road, and this is up near the intersection with Mount Hope, so it would be like where the Tradewin store is. So anyways, I get up to the bus, and the first thing he greeted me was, you're supposed to be down at the bus pickup down at the Tradewin store for pickup. It's the first greeting he was for me. And I said, really? I thought when there's an intersection. So it was completely derogatory. It was completely poor customer service, and I've done a lot of customer service in my life. And I just shut up and said, I'm gonna find out what's what. So when I got off the bus in Bangor, I called the back office. And fortunately, I spoke with this nice man. I don't know if he's new there, because I will say that in the past, I have sometimes spoken with some people there that don't give you the time of day. So I asked him, I said, I took the bus, this is what happened. He goes, no, he was supposed to pick you up at that intersection, no. And I said, well, he didn't, and he gave me a rash of you know what. And the comment from the guy was, oh, I think he's new. And I was thinking to myself, so what? So my general comment on that is, and I will put it on the survey as well, in tandem with the meetings that you have, is they all should be on board and online with what the rules are and what's not the rule. Where you pick up, where you don't. And don't give anybody flack when they stop, based upon the protocol and the rules. Don't give people flack. Now, I get it. It's not an easy job. I don't envy in terms of some of the things that they have to put up with sporadically, whether it's someone coming inebriated on the bus or whatever. I get it. But I've also, like I said, been in customer service a lot of times in my life, experiencing these kinds of people who are up and down. And the reality is, it is your job as customer service. And while you can't sit there and be jolly-faced all the time and laughing to customers, if you're not available for that job, that's not a job for you. Amen. So I won't put that in the survey, like I said, but just a transmit to drivers and the people that run the supervisors of that system and those drivers is everybody better be on board that you be nice to people coming in, you do your best to help them out, and a lot do. There's great people out there, but there have been some, and I don't know if they're still there or not, who are just in this complete, I can't stand this job, and I'm going to show you how much it is, and it's completely inappropriate. And if I acted that way in a variety of jobs that I had in life, I probably would not have that job anymore.
All right. People that need to catch buses, you know that it's 5 o'clock.
That's 15 more minutes. Hey, good point here, right?
Can I add, your point's well taken. And again, it's part of the service quality factor. One of the characteristics we always ask of people is, the bus driver and the attitudes of the bus operators. And it's part of the experience, and it's important. I may also add too, though, that people in this community need to keep in mind that being a bus operator is a good position. And I think, Lori's always short of drivers most of the time. Sure. So, and this is true every place in the United States. Being a bus driver is not a bad occupation. It is, as you say, challenging at times, but we really, and even in this city, have problems in hiring people and people understanding that it is a good position and it is a good life. So, if you have someone who's chronically unemployed or is unemployed currently, there's no reason they should not look to be a bus driver. And, I could give you a list as long as my arm of my clients across North America who are looking for bus drivers, including, but first place, see Lori first. Anyways, yes, I'll give a little pitch here, sales pitch, you know.
Hello, Kim Meyerdix again from Bangor. I wonder if we can go back to, with your vast experience with dealing with other cities, how you look at the data of who's riding now, okay? And how decisions are made to either we've heard it said, and different city councilors or whatever have mentioned, getting smaller buses for routes that don't have the activity at this time. And one of the concerns I have is, well, you're using the data that exists in the status quo. And if there were, let's say, extended hours, that would be a vastly different, in my opinion, it would be a vastly different amount of people. So if we're going to use the status quo, could you discuss how you view that and deciding what routes are going to be the most?
Yeah, well, I'll start off, and Brian does a lot of the technical stuff, but let me talk first about what you usually do is you look at the present characteristics of your ridership, and then you do census tract overlays and see where there's similar people who have similar profiles demographically to those people who are riding today. And if we have unserved areas, then you have potential for more people to ride, okay? So, I mean, you're looking at that. What we come up with is called a transit propensity model. It includes demographics, includes, you know, all the demographic information, not only age, how many cars are available in the household, whether people like answered the US Census and said they, you know, travel to work so many miles and what distance. The US Census data from 2010, even though it's going to be updated in a couple of years, is very valuable in that regard, because you look at, you know, how many minutes it takes people to travel to their occupation, which is very important in terms of determining travel times and how service frequencies have to be. So you come up with a transit propensity model and you apply that to the area and you look at it. That includes the existing characteristics of who's riding today. So we know that this is the type of person that's riding in that particular city. It doesn't exclude other people, because there's habits that they may have that come out of data and come out of surveys that show them that they have the potential to use the service.
Like later hours.
Yeah, or like a lot of people say, hey, I don't want to own a car, or I live in a certain area, or, you know, they have certain other habits. There's a lot of things that get into psychographics about, you know, what their lifestyle is and how they live their lives and all these sorts of things that go into these propensity models. Depends on the level of sophistication you want to get to. Let me answer your other question, though, about smaller buses. Just because a 30-foot bus is out there doesn't mean it's any cheaper to operate than having a bus that's 15 feet.
Exactly.
70% of the cost is the driver, is the human being that has to drive it. And that's a concern as well. I mean, there's a lot of places we successfully operate smaller buses and smaller vehicles, but that's for considerations that they're going into neighborhoods. So people may not want a 30-foot heavy-duty transit bus coming into the neighborhood. Or it may be easier for us to keep on a more frequent schedule by operating a smaller vehicle. We're looking at that. We're looking at fleet composition. We're looking at the types of things. It's not always a panacea, though, to buy different buses, because, you know, I mean, everybody probably knows the Southwest Airlines story, even though Southwest doesn't service Maine, unfortunately, that they have one type of aircraft, and that's why they've been able to keep their, you know, their costs low, because they have only one type of a plane to train their pilots on, and they have one storeroom with parts for one airplane. So I'm not saying that's the end all. I mean, we have mixed fleets in most of the places we operate in, but there's a cost associated with that, and it's training, and it's storing the parts, and it's the maintenance. So, Brian?
Yeah, John covered a lot of the points, but just to add in terms of how we make decisions, every city that we work with has their own set of data, and ridership is just one component of the data. We rely a lot on ratios as well, like ridership per hour or cost per hour, which varies from route to route. And to your point about if there's more ridership, if we extend the hours, then we're capturing both of those in the ridership per hour metric. So again, we don't just look at ridership per hour, we look at kind of everything all together and make decisions based on as much information as possible.
So the decision is, if I can just say, the decision is not just based on what we have right now. That you do input the possibility of future
Making decisions on what's happening right today would be like, if the world's coming to an end tonight, then it would be appropriate for us to make decisions on that basis. But we have to look at trends in terms of population growth, we have to look at development growth, we have to look at, for example, in this state, the population is aging. So what that shows to us is there's a greater potential for us to carry more people on transit. There's also the need to provide more paratransit service, obviously, to older people who may be unable to ride the conventional fixed route service. So that has to be considered in the equation as well. And that goes back to, some of the things that were brought up tonight. In order to accommodate an older population, we sure need shelters. We sure need designated stops, because older people or people with significant disabilities, particularly cognitive disabilities, can be challenged by even going to a bus stop and making sure they're getting on the right bus. So, all those things are considered in this process. If anybody has to make a bus, you're not going to...
It's too late.
Sort of my stand-up point. Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to, one more thing about the small buses, because it's something that a few different people have proposed, and a few different riders have said to me, and I've noticed myself riding on them, that just using buses, the small buses themselves, is a lot more inconvenient, because they have these steep, little narrow stairs that you have to get up into the bus, and if you have bags of groceries, or if you have kids and a stroller, it's just a pain. And then they're just less convenient to use all around. If we're trying to make the system more convenient, then
Most heavy-duty transit buses from here on in are really low floor.
Right.
So they can be entirely accessible to people with walkers and people in wheelchairs. And frankly, they're much easier to clean, and you have less incidents of people tripping and falling, so you end up being sued. So, that's another reason to have a low floor. Anybody else? Yes, over in the corner with her.
So my name is Christine, and I live in Bangor and work in Orono. So sometimes I take the Old Town route up. And I just want to reiterate how important it is to have a solid bus service with more hours offered, and also later evening hours. As a young person who's recently moved to Maine, a lot of young people right now are moving away from Maine. And I came here for a job. And one of the things that I look for in an area is, do they have a good transit system? When I look at housing, I say, can I take a bus to work? I've been apartment shopping, and that's one of the things that I look for is, can I take the bus to work? And right now I do take it sometimes, but I feel like it's a bit of a chicken and an egg scenario. I don't take it very often because it either puts me 30 minutes early or 30 minutes late for work. And so if it were offered more frequently, I could take it, and I want to take it so badly. Both for the environmental reasons, for the pollution reasons, and financial. I'm saving a ton of gas, and it's a good long distance between here and Orono when it comes to daily driving on gas. So just to reiterate, we really appreciate what you're doing, but this is a really valuable service, and if we have more hours, it'll be much easier for more people to use it. So thank you.
Thank you. To speak to your points, there's a lot of places, and hopefully, we can get to that point here in Bangor. There's no reason. We have people who build and operate apartment complexes like in San Francisco and in Oakland and in Los Angeles that offer an incentive of giving people who sign up for leases, they get a free bus pass. People in the Bay Area of San Francisco, developers, if you want a tax break, you have to be transit friendly in terms of your development. You have to provide the option of having a transit pass to people. These things aren't foreign, and we're doing them today And, you know, the other thing is, I mean, people who use transit on a regular basis, you can get a discount on your regular automobile insurance if you sign up with certain people. If you can show them you have a monthly pass and you ride transit on a regular basis, you can get a discounted automobile rate. I mean, what other benefit can we provide you? Also, by the way, there's tax benefits too. If you don't know it, if you're an employer or work with somebody and you don't have a pre-tax program, there are 2 IRS approved programs. You can take out your money for your transit stuff pre-tax before your federal tax is taken out. It reduces your tax burden and it reduces, believe it or not, your employer's tax burden. Also, if you have a big employer, you should ask them about subsidizing. An employer can subsidize up to $265 a month per employee. I mean, that's what, 3 times the cost of our monthly pass. And they can write it off their federal tax. And at that level, it's not a taxable benefit to the employee. I mean, there are so many things that we need to make people aware of in this community that are there, that are hidden incentives that may not know about it now. And to speak to your issue, I mean, we can get to that point. It just takes the initiative. But you know, I'm pleased today that we had so many people here in the room and so many people who are interested and active and vocal about transit. I mean, we go to a lot of places, we end up with 3 people in the room, and I have to listen to, you know, him talk all the time, rather than listen to people in the audience, you know? So it's very encouraging, and, you know, I mean, whatever we do, and hopefully in the end, you know, we come up with recommendations that can be implemented. I mean, the energy and what I hear today in this room is a great nucleus towards doing very imaginative things that will benefit the entire community. I mean, this is the way, you know, Portland, Oregon is like transit nirvana, you know? And everybody talks about Portland, but not Portland, Maine, the other one, unfortunately. But, you know.
That's the other one.
Yeah, the other one, yeah. But, you know, I mean, a lot of the genesis of what's so well up there and why that's such a livable community and why people want to go there is a lot of the same energy. I mean, the same sorts of things we've been talking about 25 years ago when that system was like, what are we going to do with this thing? And now, you know, it's one of the best systems in the world. And Portland, Oregon is one of the most livable cities in the world, you know? So, I mean, you have that energy. I mean, we need to keep it going. Thank you for your comments. Yes, ma'am.
So on the subject of the smaller buses, I hope that you're going to have a paragraph in your report, because every time I've gone to a city council meeting, there's been a councilor that has said offhand, and I hope you consider smaller buses. And I understand the reasons behind that, and I hope your report kind of hits upon the pros and cons of smaller buses.
Well, we'll discuss the issue. I mean, you know, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's too early in the study to totally dismiss anything at this standpoint. You know, I mean, we may end up with recommending rickshaws or something. I mean, you know, everything's on the table. Helicopters too, yeah.
The other thing that I want to touch upon is that when you do a report and you make some recommendations, are you in a position to know what kind of federal funding and grants that you might need to apply?
Yeah, we'll identify the opportunities. Unfortunately, in the great state of Maine, you don't have a state program, but you know, we'll identify opportunities at the federal level and the different types of grant opportunities that are available. Both, you know, the feds are not much into operating anymore. It's mostly capital. The limitations on money for operating, which is the most acute need here, are very limited. Although Lori does a great job of scrounging operating money from the feds. But, you know, we'll look at that and figure out, you can use some of the capital money as capital cost of contracting for your service and all that. I mean, there's a lot of ways. We'll identify all the federal money that's available.
The reason why I asked that is we have talked with Lori, and she has very kindly outlined why it is that they're not able to provide bus service to a very nice veterans clinic that we have. My husband gets his health care there, and it's very good. But it's at the top of a high hill, or it is 4/10 of a mile from the nearest spot that the bus comes. And the reason why the bus does not come to the veterans clinic, although they've been asked many times, is because the parking lot's not designed in a manner in which the bus can enter, turn around,
Yeah.
go under the canopy, pick up people without taking the canopy off, and coming back, and the turn back onto the main road is too tight. So the question is, isn't there somewhere that there's federal monies that can make those changes in the parking lot so we can provide services such as needed in the
Well, I mean, there is capital money. We do a lot of work in Florida with the Veterans Administration because a significant part of the population, particularly in Western Florida, are veterans. So we do a lot of work there with them. And you can go back and retrofit facilities. Obviously, you get into governmental, red tape of enormous proportions to do that. I think the answer here is to bring to developers and anyone who's having a development such as that, that's what we call a DRI, a development of regional impact, to make them aware of trying to make it transit friendly before they even get to, before they're designing it, And I bring the point up about these parking garages downtown. Obviously they were built, people think that they had a need for 400 spaces. The issue is maybe we could have provided them with options in terms of transit options that they could have been 200 space parking facilities instead of 400 parking space facilities, and we could provide a transit to them. And instead of enduring the expense for the parking spaces to build them and maintain them, they could have been getting a tax break for subsidizing the people riding. So a lot of it's information, a lot of it's making people aware of the options. We got about 10 more minutes, I believe. Yes, sir. Muji, in the back.
I want to make one comment on your diet.
Okay.
I don't need this. Do I need this?
Oh, you sound better out there. You sound like Elvis.
No, don't start singing.
Beatles. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
One thing I haven't heard tonight, and I was thinking about it. I believe that in this system, bus drivers, people that work for the bus system, they need to be trained in culture sensitivity and diversity. That's very important. A lot of drivers don't understand diversity or sensitive diversity. Sensitivity is important to me. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Do you guys have like a training program where you can teach men and women how to, be comfortable around people of color, if you want to say?
Yeah, as part of the Title VI requirements that the FTA, I'll take that. It's part of the Title VI requirements, which is part of the Civil Rights Act, that every agency has to have a Title VI plan. Cultural competency is part of that. So, looking at the needs of what your population is. The first part of the process is identifying the cultural needs of your population, and then looking at the sensitivities. The first issue is linguistics, understanding language issues, and then understanding a lot of the other cultural issues. You don't want to be, offensive to someone because they're certain culture. It's...
The reason I said that, brother, is that you have a large contingent of indigenous people. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And then there's another barrier where there's people who speak Spanish. I've noticed there's a lot of people coming to Bangor who are Hispanic. They're indigenous too, but they have a problem. They can't speak English. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I just wanted to let you guys know about something.
Yeah.
And this is very important, given on the, I know this is Eric from Bangor again. Just wanted to let you folks know, especially the folks that listen online, on Monday night at 7 o'clock at the State House, Governor Mills is giving her State of the Budget address to the legislature. There's going to be chances for us to get down to Augusta and testify on the budget. One of the things that happened in, I believe it was 2013, was the transportation subsidy that the state was providing to the municipalities was eliminated. We need to be asking our legislators to reinstate that subsidy for the local transportation systems. That's why the city had to eliminate the Auburn Road. It wasn't just the lowest ridership, but because that subsidy was gone, they would have had to put a lot of the cost. Hamden, same thing with Saturday bus service in 2015. It was eliminated because the town didn't want to have to come up with the additional revenue to pay for it, because the subsidy was eliminated. So we need to reinstate that subsidy to the municipalities to help fund local transit.
Thank you. We're also gonna have to get additional funding because the mic got broken.
Wasn't me, I heard how to use that.
We've got about 5 minutes left. You know, again, I can't say it enough. Tell your friends, loved ones, neighbors, co-workers, please fill out the survey. You know, as much input as we could get is gonna be very beneficial to us in the long term in terms of coming up with a plan that's right for the city. Darcy, yes?
Yeah, and so how can we find out about possibly extending the length of the survey time past 2 weeks?
We'll discuss that with Richard and Laura.
Okay.
We'll get back to you.
Right.
And so currently the best place for information is the website you put up until other means or just search.
Yeah, the website's the best place right now. And we're, you know, after result of this meeting and other ones, we'll probably be assessing how much more we do. I just fixed it so we can balance the main budget. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Great job.
Can anyone give me a ride home?